2025 Early Connections Conference, Expression, presented by the Van Slaan Foundation. Early Connections Conference logo. Math, Movement, and Communication, building the foundations of early learning.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our presentation titled Math, Movement, and Communication, Building the Foundations of Early Learning. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce you to our team of presenters. Come on in. Yeah, come on in. Get yourself settled. So on the right side of the slide, there's a headshot of each of us. We are all providers in the Deafblind School at Perkins School for the Blind. We work with deafblind children with moderate to high support needs from 3 to 22 years of age. So I'm going to ask everyone to say their name and give a personal description. My name is Dr. Lauren Kling. I'm a physical therapist, and my personal pronouns are she, her. I am a short, brown-haired woman with blue glasses. I am wearing a black dress.
Hi, my name is Jess Meadowbrook. I am a teacher in the Deafblind School working with elementary age students. I'm a white woman with shorter length brown hair, wearing a black t-shirt and a multicolor floral skirt.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Renee Clark. I am a speech and language pathologist working here at Perkins with students with a range of complex communication challenges, and as well as many augmentative and supportive tools. I am a white woman with brown long hair. I'm wearing a blue top, glasses, and gray pants.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Langen Crane. I am a teacher in the deafblind program. I work with students with high support needs and complex communicators. I'm a white woman of average height with medium length brown hair, wearing a striped shirt under a black blazer.
All right, so let's cover what we're going to be talking about today and what we want you to take away from this presentation. So some of our objectives is that you'll understand a basic overview of what foundational math skills are and how they may look at home or in the classroom, to appreciate how interdisciplinary team collaboration in areas like communication and movement can be used to grow math skills outside of the typical classroom setting, to help you identify what your learners' math skills may look like specifically and how to best use them. And we want you to learn fun and functional ways to build math skills across your learner's day. Still me. So math, let's talk about what it means to do math. There are many definitions of math, and you may wonder, based on your students' progress reports or IEP objectives, what math looks like for them. And while there are many definitions of math, some of them are narrow in terms of only focusing on things like operations and numeracy. So we wanted to try to find a more inclusive definition that supports the learners that we serve. So I found a definition from Southern New Hampshire University that says mathematics is the study of quantity, structure, space, and change. And we believe this definition allows for more entry points and more ways for students to access math, especially for our learners with disabilities and sensory loss. And some examples of math that we will be talking about today are identifying same versus different, spatial terms like on and off, left and right, sorting by feature, and counting. On the right to the slide, you'll see a diagram that says mathematics is. It's an overlapping Venn diagram with multiple colors. In each of the circles that says theoretical, and art, language, a process of thinking, and practical. So what we want you to take away from this presentation is that math is everywhere and it's for everyone.
Try to remove this if I can, or at least make it taller. That's better. So talking about my domain of communication, I think it's important to define what communication means. I also included in this slide an image of a document titled the NJC Communication Bill of Rights. This document lists 12 rights related to communication, and I included this in the slide to emphasize that communication rights of all persons should be respected and promoted for those with high support needs. This includes the right to dignity and respect, the right to be spoken to instead of spoken about, and access to successful augmentative and alternative communication supports. So what is communication? Communication is the active process of sharing information and ideas, including both the concept of understanding and expressing messages. It requires action and adjustment on both ends from both communication partners, so a degree of mutual respect. People communicate in many different ways, I'm sure as you all know, or including many different methods, ranging from spoken language, vocalizations, sign language, writing and typing, texting like we all do, as well as some aided tools such as photographs, whole or partial object symbols, and high-tech AAC devices. And this is especially true for our students. It's important to also note that understanding communication or receptive communication can be done through a combination of any of the methods that I just mentioned, while expressive communication can be a different combination of such methods. An individual may understand best using real 2D photographs while they express themselves using sign language. And we work by the philosophy that all communication is good communication, and that should always be honored and acknowledged. And we call this philosophy total communication. That's the approach we take here at Perkins. So what does communication have to do with math? Well, primarily vocabulary at its core. Math concepts come with a range of topic-specific as well as general everyday terms. We can call those more general terms core words, which are the words that make up about 80% of the language we use every day, including I, me, go, stop, don't, big, small, in, out, and so on. These words are much more abstract and can be attached to so many different contexts, which can make teaching them a bit more challenging, but nonetheless essential to learning math as well as other skills in communication in day-to-day life. We can call them more topic-specific words, fringe words. These words tend to be more meaningful, at least initially to our students, and are often more motivating because the words are more conceptually concrete. A word like juice, bubbles, book, or even specific words like circle and square related to math concepts. It's important to cover the topic of vocabulary because we have to know what we're talking about before we can demonstrate that skill. So how do we teach core and fringe vocabulary as it relates to math for our learners? Well, you're going to hear these terms highlighted a lot throughout the presentation, and we're going to expand on them more. But first and foremost would be model. Include the language in their world across their day. Consider the vocabulary that is meaningful, motivating, functional, and individualized to that learner. Of course, make sure the information is presented in an accessible form to them based on their profile using those communication methods that I talked about with total communication. And think about the team. Consistency across the board is an essential support for your learners, for all of your learners, so collaboration is key. As a team, we're saying on top, are we saying under, are we saying above, are we saying below? It all matters and it depends on who your learner is.
And now I'm going to talk about why movement has something to do with math. So on the right side of the slide, there's an illustration of a young girl in a bright pink shirt who's smiling and reaching out with her arms while sitting in her blue wheelchair. So broadly, movement is the way that you move your body through space, and that can mean a lot of different things. It can be a voluntary movement, which is active and intentional, versus an involuntary movement, like a reflexive movement that you don't have control over. You can have fine motor, which is small and precise movements, or you can be doing gross motor skills, which are big movements like standing or jumping. Movement can also be very subtle. We have a lot of students where we're watching what their eyes do in order to get the information from them. And it can also be very obvious, someone reaching out and taking something that they'd like. Movement involves many different body systems, and so having any developmental delays or anatomical differences in those body systems can impact a person's ability to move in the way that they want to. And some of those body systems include their strength, their postural control, tone, coordination, sensory input, alertness, motivation, and more. So what does movement have to do with math? From the most basic level, if you think about how you demonstrate understanding of a skill, it involves some kind of movement. So you're either moving an item, you might be saying an answer, you might be looking at the correct group of objects. Movement also provides concrete and tangible experiences that support the learner's understanding of math concepts. So going through an obstacle course teaches you to go on, over, under, and we're going to go more on that later. The learner being able to move their own body through space helps them develop that spatial reasoning and problem-solving skills. So an example is if the learner is rolling across the floor, they might feel the different textures of the different floor surfaces in the home. They have to problem solve to get over maybe a threshold of a rug transition. And they learn about the difference between things that are close to their body versus things that are far away from their body. So A really big piece of this when you're thinking about how to teach someone math skills is that you have to understand what their physical skills are, because that informs how to make the math activities accessible to them. So if you are asking your learner to demonstrate a skill through a movement that is not in their repertoire, it's beyond their current skill level, then what you're really doing is testing the limit of their motor skills and not their math understanding. So for example, you wouldn't ask a kindergartner to write an essay in order to demonstrate that they understood the book. So as we go through this presentation, we're going to ask you to all keep in mind the 3 helpful M's: motivating, meaningful, and memorable. So motivating, we want the learner to be engaged. We want to make sure that you're using materials that the learner is showing clear and consistent interest in. You want to follow their lead, find out what they like, and then figure out how to build math skills into that. We want to make sure that it matters to them, that it's meaningful. So find functional daily routines and build those math activities into that. And we also want to make sure that activities are memorable, especially for kids who have disabilities and developmental delays. They need repeated exposure, consistent presentation, and lots of opportunities for practice across a variety of settings in order to be able to learn and generalize the skill. We also want to highlight that learning begins with play. Play is an essential part of learning, problem solving, developing interests, and understanding your impact on your own environment. Play fuels language, cognitive, socio-emotional, and motor development. We encourage you to create and be involved in play opportunities, but again, you want to allow your learner to lead, play their way, and support what they're learning from interacting with their environment. Play also fosters a variety of skills, such as joint attention, cause and effect relationships, active participation, initiation, and social engagement. Now we're getting into the math content.
Yeah, as Lauren said, now that we've covered our learning objectives and our definitions of math, movement, and communication, we're going to dive into math and how that could look for some of our students who have different support needs and different sensory access. On this slide, you'll see a photo of some early math manipulatives. So the skill that I always want to start with my students, just a personal preference, but a really foundational skill for our learners, is the skill of discrimination. In the context of math learning, what we mean by discrimination is the ability to differentiate between 2 distinct things, whether it's items, experiences, people. This ability to differentiate, which we're calling discrimination here, is foundational to a ton of math skills. And the example I have on the screen is just 2 kids' silverware, blue plastic handles. And if we're looking at this photo, I can discriminate between them and tell that one is a spoon and one is a fork. Discrimination is a great place to start because it is really foundational to a progression of other early math skills that your learners are going to be looking at as they get into preschool, kindergarten, and beyond. And these foundational skills will allow them to build into much more advanced math skills. So once your learner has the ability to discriminate, they can then use that and start to learn the language of same and different, assigning language to what they are already doing, telling a difference, but using that linguistic component. If they can tell what is the same and what is different, they can start to match. Once they can match, they can work towards sorting or categorizing. And with these skills, they can work on patterns up to further math skills. Another big reason I love to start with discrimination is because if you ask, can my learner discriminate? The answer is probably. Do they have a favorite toy or a favorite person? Do they notice when something is different or when someone new enters the room? And how do you know that? This is them showing that they are already able to discriminate between things in their environment through whatever sensory channel is meaningful to them or that they can access. Do they get really excited by their dad's scratchy beard? Cool, they can tell something in their sensory channels that tells them this is something different and meaningful to me. So, how do we take discrimination and promote it in our daily lives at home? You are going to hear this a lot across our mathematical concepts, but we want you to be describing. Just like Renee said earlier, modeling is huge for our students, and it's really important that we're modeling in forms that are accessible to them and that reflect their receptive and expressive communication needs. But we have a ton of opportunities all throughout our days when we could be assigning language to what they're already experiencing. So for example, if you're taking objects that are meaningful to them, like their favorite toys, you could describe how this ball is super bumpy and sign for them Oh, bumpy, cool. If they are really excited by their dad's scratchy beard, you could use their AAC device and say, Dad, beard, Mom, I don't know, smooth, use your descriptor words. And then there's a lot of opportunities around the house where we can be assigning language to things that they're experiencing that are, again, meaningful to them because that is their lives. So for example, can your learner help you clean up toys around the house and say, ooh, let's put big toys here, small toys here. Let's put round balls in here and square bricks in here. It's things that they might already be doing or that you might be doing on their behalf that you can bring them into and assign language to so they can articulate what they are noticing. I also love cooking as a discrimination activity because it is just so full of sensory experiences, whether it is touch, like a sticky pizza dough. There's always so many smells with herbs and lots of, I don't know, whatever your favorite smell is. Or another activity I love around the house is letting students be involved in picking out their outfits. It's a really meaningful activity to them, something they experience every day is what is on their bodies, but we don't always think to include them in that process. So we could talk to them about, if tactile is their main sensory channel, talk about this sweater is so soft. Maybe we could find pants that are just as soft. If they're mostly interested in visuals, ooh, this is your brightest, colorful t-shirt. Ooh, this one's only all black. And put words to what they're already noticing. Again, what I'm describing, all this work on discrimination, feels different from math as we might classically think of it, but it adds up.
All right, moving into our next topic, which is shapes. So shapes, which falls under the broader category of geometry, is a skill that's addressed throughout schooling. So that whether that be through pre-K all the way through 12th grade and beyond, in accordance with most state standards. So early geometry skills that we primarily focus on are the identification, the manipulation, and the labeling of 2D shapes like circles, squares, triangles, and 3D shapes like rectangular prisms, cylinders, pyramids, and so on. One of my favorite parts about teaching shapes is that there are so many opportunities for teaching in a multisensory manner. Whether you are accessing visually and you can see the difference between the curved line or the curves of a circle and the straight lines of a square, you may be able to tactily feel that there are 4 sides on a rectangle, but many different sides on a star. And you can also incorporate movement into this. And one of my favorite easy activities to do with this is taking pieces of tape and making shapes on the floor. So whether your learner is walking, rolling, crawling, you can go on the lines or the curves to describe the shape and get their bodies moving. So how can we promote an understanding of shapes in daily life? One concept that I think is really important to consider across all of these domains is the idea of exposure without expectations. For us as families, providers, educators, it can be really easy to slip into assessment mode in the moment. What color is this? How many sides does this have? What number? How many? And while demonstration of skills is an important part of demonstrating math understanding, there's still plenty of value in exposing our learners to these concepts without expecting a response. We can describe shapes to our learners. Oh, your splash pool is a really big circle. Ooh, this playground is a big square. Let's run to all of the corners. You can use household materials to make sensory shape bins. We have up front here some different transparent shapes. You can fill a tray with water or rice or anything that your learner finds motivating to touch and place those shapes in there to create a sensory bin. Another important tool that we use, especially for our learners with low vision or diagnosis of CBI, is light. So you can see in the front and later in our presentation, we'll be using a light box to help teach shapes. You can also use shadows on the wall to make different shapes with shadow puppets. And you can even use cardboard or small manipulatives to increase the experience. You can even do a shape scavenger hunt. So even if your learner doesn't know that a square is a square, you can hide several around the house or outside and see if you can find them all. So while they're not telling you this is a square, they're still gaining the experience. They're being exposed without expectations. And similar to Rebecca, one of my favorite ways to incorporate shapes into my teaching is getting hands-on, whether that's a cooking activity, whether it's arts and crafts. There are many easy Play-Doh or salt dough recipes that you can create with objects that you have in your house. And using either cookie cutters or even tinfoil, you can use to make into shapes and press the shapes out of the dough.
An adjacent mathematical skill when thinking about shapes is language around spatial reasoning and positioning. So when we're talking about spatial reasoning, we are talking about the ability to move oneself and objects through space in a coherent, organized manner. So in school, your teachers are thinking of this as part of geometry because we're thinking about how we can move shapes, 2D and 3D, in space. But this language can go to a much more foundational level for our early learners. We are also going to include here prepositional language. So I have some listed here, but we're thinking about words like in and out and on and off. You've heard us say it before, I'm going to say it again. For all of these math concepts, it's really important to model language for your students, especially because we're from deafblind. I think about this a lot for our students who might not have the incidental learning of hearing, but make sure that in their available sensory channel, you are modeling language for them. And I also particularly like thinking about spatial reasoning for our students with high support needs because they may have different motor skills that impact their ability to move their bodies in a meaningful way through space independently. We as staff and as families can support them in experiencing this language, even just using hand under hand prompting. So your hand under the learner's hand can help them participate and feel movement in space that they might not be initiating on their own yet, or might not have as full a range of access to. A lot of times for learners with these high support needs, it can be easier, it can be quicker to do everything for them, and it makes sense. When we have the time and space, it can be worthwhile to slow down, to tell them and show them where and how you are moving around the environment. Things that, again, because of that lack of incidental learning, because of sensory loss, they might be missing. They might be missing that when you are making their lunch, you open the fridge, you reach in, and your applesauce is on the shelf. Those are things that might just happen every day and be a mystery to them. This is a chance to use prepositional language in a way that is meaningful to them and can really support independence and growth for them. And again, I said it for the last one, but getting dressed is a really natural opportunity for our students to work in prepositional language and think about their bodies moving in space. Where in their closet do their clothes live? And how can they assist in getting dressed? What are they putting, their arm into a sleeve or their hat on their head? These are, again, natural, meaningful contexts where this language, if we aren't conscious about it, might not get presented to them in a way that's accessible for them.
All right, we're going to be moving into the concept of counting. So counting, you may often hear in course, like with phrase one-to-one correspondence. And while these things are not identical, they are very closely linked. For the purpose of this presentation, I will be referring to this skill as counting. So counting is the most complicated skill that we're going to go over today because it is complex, it's multifaceted, and it's multi-step. And learners must demonstrate mastery of each step in order to progress through the skill with the ultimate goal of being able to count. So where do you start? We start with the most concrete, which is the concept of quantity. We want our learners to use their discrimination skills like we've mentioned before. Can the learner determine when there is one of an object or when there is many of an object? Can they tell if two sets of the objects are the same or if they're different? Can they tell when one set has more or one set has less? Once we've mastered those concrete skills, we can then move towards demonstration of an understanding of numbers and the abstract. And it's typical for this phase to take a bit of time. Pairing concrete concepts and abstract concepts can be really, really challenging. So don't feel frustrated if it's taking your learner a long time to pair these skills. So moving into the concept of numbers or numerals, how does a student understand if I say or sign the word 3, how does that match up to the printed number 3? How does that match up to the 3 balls that they have in their counting jig in front of them? So once they move past that, then they're ready to understand the pattern and sequencing of counting in order. They'll learn that counting always moves from left to right. When you're counting, it's in the same sequence every time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would take us far too long to go through the detailed task analysis of every single step it takes to count. So you'll see at the bottom of the slide that this is just an example of a sequence skill progression that a learner might use. So starting at the most concrete, we might want the learner to sequence individual objects from left to right, learning that each object will take its own space before moving on to the next one. If they've demonstrated mastery of that, they might be ready to identify, whether that's tactily, auditorily, visually, if two sets of objects are the same or if they are different. Upon mastery of that, they may be ready to print or pick the correct numeral, whether that be through print or braille, after being told the number. So find the number 3. And then at the end of that, the most complex skill in this skill progression is labeling sets of objects with a numeral from a field of 3. So if I give a student 4 balls and ask them how many, they're able to pick the correct numeral from there. So how can you promote counting in your daily life? I love counting because you can count anything and everything in your learner's life. So whether that's how many splashes do you want to do in the bathtub? How many steps does it take to get us from the car to the house? How many bites of food do you want? You can count anything and everything. Even if your learner is fully dependent on you for movement, you can count everything in their life. You also can focus on the action and model the language. The learner can kind of guide their learning by initiating an action, whether they're clapping their feet, blinking their eyes, moving objects. They're participating by initiating the action, and you provide the language. And providing this model allows the brain to receive the information without the demand of producing it. So going back to exposure without expectations. And you can get moving when you're counting. Movement is a really easy way to incorporate counting. Again, even if your learner is fully dependent on others for mobility. So we're gonna run for 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're gonna jump on the trampoline 6 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Everything can be counted.
So tying this all together into our communication recommendations, what do we hope you can take away from this presentation? Well, the first would be to make language accessible for your learner's profile, as I mentioned before. And this can involve a little or a lot of learning on your end. As I mentioned in the intro slides, successful communication requires work to express and understand from both ends, and knowing a learner's hearing and vision status is essential to know how they can best understand these vocabulary concepts. Whether that means learning the sign language signs that correspond to the terms, creating tactile or object symbols that represent the shapes, or using photos. What does the accessible material look like? Be explicit. We can take for granted information that we learn implicitly or passively by looking at them or hearing them. We don't put a lot of energy into this incidental learning. And somebody with low vision or that is hard of hearing will need more explicit teaching, more time with the concepts, and detailed descriptions to learn the vocabulary around them. Make it functional. Think about your learner's life experiences. What activities or routines are a part of their day and essential to them? An example that I love is that I have a student that likes to ride the glass elevator at the mall. How can the team incorporate this activity into their math experience and exposure? Can we count the number of floors? How can we add position words like up and down, vocabulary like more, finished into that motivating and functional experience? Don't think too small. If it's important to you and the learner, it's important to us, the team. Lastly is keep it consistent. Try to keep your language consistent when talking about the concepts for early learners. Think about the communication systems they use at school or with their therapy providers and see if it looks the same across settings. Or maybe you notice things look pretty different, and how does that impact your learner? Maybe you don't know what materials at school even look like, and this can open the door to that conversation. Talk to the team and see where things can become more consistent, or maybe what kind of family training is needed to get you there.
So I will follow that up with my own version. So we want to make sure that the math is accessible. So like I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that they can actually physically demonstrate the skills that are involved, make sure that this materials meet the learner's sensory access, material preferences. Also, you want to make sure that the demands of the activity are fitting with their current skills. So, and you can figure that out through observation. So if you have a student who, a learner that you are stacking cup towers with, and they are knocking down the towers, but they are not yet helping to build the towers, then when you're using something like a counting jig, you don't want to ask them to put things onto the jig. They're taking things apart. They should be taking things off of the jig, and that's how they're going to have better access to that counting skill. Also, we want to make sure to be explicit. So as has been said a few times before, you want to describe an object's characteristics while the learner is physically interacting with it. And you can label spatial concepts during movement. If you work at Perkins, you have seen me going around saying we're taking a left turn and now we're going straight to the lobby, and I'm just talking to the students the whole time, whether we're walking there or whether they're being pushed in a wheelchair or pushing themselves in a chair. We want to make sure that when we are doing these play activities that we're keeping it functional and interesting. So like Jess said, again, if if you see me in action, if I'm bouncing with the student, we're counting how many times we're bouncing. When we do transfers in and out of a chair, say, okay, we're going to get out of the chair. Let's count to 3. 1, 2, 3, and then get out of the chair. And then also you can use diving rings or other manipulatives to, if you're doing an activity like when we go to the pool with our APE class, to count their laps as they're going around the pool, again, whether they're going under their own power or they're getting some physical assistance to do that. And then we want to consider the environment. We want to make sure that we're setting our learners up for success by providing them a wide variety of material options across these activities. So you can use items that have the same category but different characteristics. So if you have a bin full of balls like we do in our APE class, you want to have balls that have different sizes, different textures, having a round ball versus a football versus a spiky ball and a wiffle ball and balls that make noise, all of it. And then if it's safe, you want to allow the learner time to problem solve when they come across a physical obstacle. So, if it's a safe environment, it's okay for a student to fall. And then it's okay to give them the time, if you have it, to let them get themselves back up again. Because when they're taking that additional time to move their own body through space, they are learning those spatial concepts.
So next, we're going to share a case study of one of our shared learners and how math looks for him across different settings and with different providers. So on the right side of the screen, you're going to see a picture of a young boy. He has spiky blonde hair. He's wearing blue and orange glasses, a white t-shirt. He has a chest harness on his chair, and he is smiling warmly at the camera. So here's an overview of this student and who he is as a person. So we have an infographic in the middle, a yellow section that describes his background, a red piece that describes his communication, a blue piece that describes his math skills, and a green piece that describes his motor skills. So for his background, this student is a happy and motivated 7-year-old boy. He's diagnosed with deafblindness and a developmental delay. He does have visual access to 2D images and in-air sign language, and he does have auditory access to spoken language with his hearing aids. In terms of communication, he is a total communicator. He uses gestures, body language, vocalizations, sign approximation, and switches. He is also used in emerging use of a high-tech eye gaze system with 2D photographs. In terms of his math skills, he's able to sort items by color and size. He's able to place objects left to right in a jig with support, and he's able to match printed numbers from a field of 3. In terms of his motor skills, he's independently exploring his environment through rolling and emerging crawly skills, pulling and reaching. He is more likely to reach with his right arm, and this is important to know of your learner if they do have a side bias, if they always reach with their right arm, or if they always drop things with their left arm. That's something to consider when you're asking them how to demonstrate skills, and you'll see that later in one of these videos. And he is a wheelchair user. So before we play this video, this is just a brief description of what we're doing in this activity. So the learner and I are using a light board, and you'll see me give him tactile representations of shapes. I'm describing the shape, I'm signing the shape, and then asking him to find the shape on the light box. There should be audio for this.
Circle. Yes, you're touching. Circle. You can take it off. Pull that circle. Pull the circle. You have circle. Circle. Yes. Are you ready? It's going to be my turn, circle. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Finish. Turn is finished. My turn, circle. Thank you. Let's find circle. Let's find circle. Where is circle? Yes, that's a circle. You found circle. Nice. Yeah, found circle. Awesome. You have circle. Yeah.
So as you can see, the learner was very motivated by this activity. He loves light. He loves being able to touch things. You can hear him laughing throughout the progress. And I'm not sure how many times I said circle in this 1 to 2 minute clip, but I'm sure it's quite a few. So describe, describe, describe. So even though he's not telling me that it's a circle either through voice or AAC, he's receiving that language and is able to demonstrate that he was able to find the circle. Now, going back to that right-sided bias, the student does reach for the answer with their right arm. If I wanted to try to confirm his choice, I might try putting it on the left side. But this is just one way that we expose our students to shapes in a one-to-one individual lesson.
All right, make sure the volume's up as high as it can go. So this video demonstrates a bit about positioning terms in communication. I'll play the video and then describe a bit about what it involves. Small. Oh, down, down, down to the ground. It fell. Do you want more space ball? Do you want more ball? Oh, you put your hands together for a nice more ball. Yes. Your turn. Should we bring it up, 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 up? And oh, up, 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 up. You got it. Oh, no. Down, 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 down. Down, down, down. Oh! Down to the ground. Oh, you put your hands together again for more ball? Where did that ball go? I think it fell under the table. All right, so some things to highlight. So the learner is sitting in their activity chair directly facing me. We're playing with the learner's most motivating toy, an expandable multicolored ball called the Hoberman sphere, or as you'll hear me refer to as the space ball. I'm using repetition and emphasis to model the position of the toy and tuning into the learner's body language as they use their body to request more, and even modeling additional communication like shaking their head to pair with no. The learner is engaged and excited, imitating actions with the toy and showing some great joint attention skills and giving some nice giggles along the way. Small.
Okay, so this is the same learner now in a direct physical therapy session. The student is laying on a mat table and has custom from our assistive device center, if you saw them in the exhibition area, custom anklets that we can attach materials to, like nail brushes and plastic spiral hair ties. And the bracelets are meant to draw attention to the students' legs and encourage them to get that sensory information and move their own body. But it's also another opportunity where we can discuss math concepts. So I'm going to play the video now and then do a summary.
Right foot. Whoa, I caught it. Let's give them perspective. Right. Right foot. How about orange? Orange. My favorite color is purple, but there's no purple coin.
Together?
Yeah, it is. Right foot. What? Your grandma's favorite color is purple? And your favorite color is pink, right? Yeah. Or blue? Do you like blue too? Together. Rainbow.
So for context, this is a learner who a year ago didn't really seem aware that he had feet. And so this is a skill that we've really focused on. And I take videos during a lot of my sessions so that I can go back and see everything that happened. And he had been only reaching up until that point to reach for the toys and the materials. And this was the first time that his feet were interesting enough to reach past the materials and start to interact with his feet. So I really wanted to highlight that and reward that for him and identify for him what he was touching. So again, describe, describe, describe. Every time he touched his right foot, I followed it up. You could see it startled him a little bit at first, but by the end he was laughing and we were having that conversation about his feet and what he was touching. So this whole activity reinforces his body awareness, positioning, spatial reasoning, as well as the physical skills of working on getting his knee to his chest, getting that sensory input, and it's just generally fun.
So we hope this presentation has shed some light on how math is for everyone, and we have the power to bring math to our learners in a way that makes sense to them as an individual. Instead of focusing solely on content, it can also be helpful to consider what actions we'd like the learner to demonstrate. Is it a physical skill? Is it asking them to express and answer through language? With a bit of creativity, and mathematical content can be delivered in a way that supports skill development as a whole through supporting these math skills across existing routines, understanding sensory access to materials for language, physical skills and positioning, stressing that collaboration, working together for overall consistency and clarity, and embracing the unconventional and encouraging learning through play. So on this side, we have an array of 6 examples of math materials, both conventional and unconventional. So from the top row going left to right, a fashion sketch of a woman with a plaid dress and some geometric shapes around her, a photo of a multicolored shape puzzle using wooden shape pieces that can be sorted into their appropriate section with a printed English language label below, an obstacle course with some multicolored domed balance steps, red obstacle pieces, a play structure, platform steps, tall bench, and a fabric tunnel. And on the bottom row going left to right, an example of a counting jig on a desk. The jig is slantboard style with 5 shallow slots going left to right. Representations of the number 5 and number 4 attached to laminated squares with a tactile piece. And then a describe page from a student's communication device in an array of 5 boxes across and 4 boxes down. Each box includes a vocabulary word such as big or little. So at this time, we can take in-person audience questions first. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us. We'll then take questions from the Zoom audience. If you're attending in person, just raise your hand and we'll bring the mic to you. If you're attending virtually, please put your questions in the chat box. And if we don't have any time to answer everyone's question, we can follow up with you after. So thank you.
I have a question, but just to let people online know to please type your question into the Q&A. So my question is there a good resource where to find a lot of these materials? Looks like you're making a lot of them, but I was wondering if you have any resources.
Yeah, I'm sure we can all contribute a little bit of information to this question, but a lot of what we have is just really cheap homemade resources that we can use to create manipulatives or materials for math access. Don't be afraid to use what you have on hand and think creatively about it. Things like an empty egg carton can be used as a sorting jig for small toys or pieces. Think about what you have a lot of. Maybe it's a lot of blocks. Maybe we're using things outside the house. Maybe we're collecting pine cones, things like that. Things that we can describe and have really interesting textures that can contribute to math access and all of the concepts that we covered today. Anyone have anything to contribute to that? No? Cool. There are some really good websites. APH, the American Printing House for the Blind, does offer a little bit more high quality, expensive materials if you're looking for that to support your classroom. Yes, talk to your TVI about those resources if you do have one, or what it means to have adapted materials like that. What else do we have for purchasing sites as well?
If we're thinking about more of those higher quality, but also higher price materials, you'll see up here, we have one product from AbleNet. AbleNet makes a lot of great assistive devices for students who, especially switch users is what I think of them for, but they have some great products.
Hello, I'm Caroline. I'm an O&M in the Perkins Lower School. And I wanted to talk about the discrimination because that's something I work on with my students with same and different with shapes. And I'm looking for advice because I have students that they can't see what I'm showing them if I'm showing them 2 shapes or the spoon and fork, but they also can't really touch it. One of my students can't really move his hands that well. It's sometimes I touch items to the back of his hand, but I'm how can I present that question to students if you can't like touch it? Because normally I'm just like, oh, let them explore with their hands, but I haven't, that student can't use their hands. So I thought like maybe their feet or something. I just want to know like what your suggestions are for that.
Yeah, and I think we included in our references, we didn't really highlight it in the presentation, but we utilized the active learning methodology by Dr. Lily Nelson a lot. With that idea, it's similar to how we said about physical access and meaningful and motivating, but we want to think about how someone is using their body. So Rebecca and I have a shared student who's really using their mouth more than anything right now. So we're using, and I'll describe for the virtual audience, we have PVC frames that are very simple to put together. And I believe have instructions on the Assistive Device Center website for how to make that. But if you want them to have materials, then how are they moving their body? If they're very fisted and close into their body,
Right.
then you want to position something just maybe a centimeter away. So they have the choice of whether or not to interact with it, whether that's using a slant board, whether that's using some sort of arm that has a clamp, or whether it's putting it on a PVC frame, so that it's just something that, again, incidental learning that they're bumping into and getting that exposure with, rather than necessarily doing, like a hand under hand where they might not get that full physical access to the materials. So that's where the team collaboration is really helpful, to be able to give them that exposure without expectation in different settings across their day, so that it's more recognizable and familiar when you need to use it in a more functional setting.
That's great. Yes, I want to hear you too. Yes.
The two additional thoughts I had for your question, I have some learners who are very similar, who have that really like tight hand position that makes the inside of the palm, where it's really sensitive, hard to access. My first thought is I totally agree with your train of thought to think about the rest of their body. And like Lauren said, of course, making sure that they have the choice about whether or not to interact. But I have a student who I ask her consent, but we really make use of her cheeks, which is a pretty sensitive area as well. I've had a student in the past who uses feet, just like you suggested, and that's definitely a sensitive area. So much as I think we like to focus on hands and especially the inside of the palm, partially out of like appropriateness, it's a really appropriate thing with which to touch the world. But I think it's also partially social standards. And if tactile sense is available to them, we should consider some alternatives. My other thought though is I have one student who tactile just isn't the right modality for her. She technically could. And of course, as a student with low vision, I want to consider that for her, but she is way more interested in smell and in hearing as her main modalities. So I know O&M, that might be a different challenge, but can we think about, the crinkle of leaves in the fall and different sounds around campus?
Yeah.
Could we think about finding the different smells of, I think we've got some pretty weird smells around campus that we can maybe cut down. So, but I think you're on the right train of thought and you're asking the right questions.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to, my name is Nancy and I'm a TVI, and I wanted to kind of put in a little vote for music experiences as part of math. And, I admire the Perkins music therapists for what they do, and other music therapists that I see, and I steal a lot of things from them, because sound, if your student is not a tactile student and not a visual student, sound can be really amazing, and we can use music. So I like those resources when I can steal them.
Absolutely. Shout out music therapists. We wish you were on our panel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to highlight, we picked PT speech educational setting. We're already kind of a big crew as it is, but this presentation could be done with any of the providers that we have at Perkins, every single area of the student's day: vocational, audiology, APE, O&M, OT, social group. Any setting that the student is in is an opportunity to work on and reinforce these skills. And that's why it's so helpful, being on a team with Renee and discussing, okay, so in APE, O&M, and PT, when we're gonna, O&M's going to bring them across the street. I'm going to do an obstacle course with them. APE is going to do laps in the pool. Are we saying start or are we saying go? What is the word that we're going to pick for start and stop for this student so that it's universal across their team? And then having the speech therapist say to us, okay, now let's bring that to the next level, and telling me what that next level is, because I don't inherently know that, but I can incorporate that into my sessions once I'm told that that's what they're ready for.
Okay, we have some questions from online. Love the math jig. Any suggestions for where to purchase or how to make one?
In terms of making one, our Assistive Device Center does have information on their website on how to make slant boards. And so this is a slant board that has some cutouts. The counting jig that we featured has Veltec, which is like a loop Velcro fabric on it so that things can be Velcroed on and off. But we also have counting jigs that are made out of cardboard that have boxes. Some of them have a clear front so that it's easier to see. So they are very customized to our students' needs. And I have seen families just like packing tape, cardboard, spray paint. You know, we use a triple wall cardboard here at the Assistive Device Center, but use what you've got. Renee mentioned using an egg carton. If someone has the fine motor skills to be doing it in a smaller container, things like that. And also for purchasing, APH does have slant boards that you could then Velcro a frame onto to make those tactily distinct sections.
APH also has dividers.
APH also has dividers, Rebecca is telling me.
Thank you. Another question from online. Congratulations for this wonderful work you're doing. How do you introduce an SGD, which would be speech generating device, and math for students with CVI?
Yeah, that's a really big and important question. I think in understanding their profile is really essential for where to start. If they're already a device user and you have a way to incorporate a topic page for math, their math course, either it's shapes or if they can access printed numerals, that's also a big question. It's what kind of access method are they getting to understand, and what level are they currently at? It's hard to say not knowing the individual, but if we're supporting something that they already have, talk to the team about vision, talk to their educator about what their numerals look like. Do they already have materials in class that we can then adapt and put onto their device? Are there other ways that we can collaborate as a team to talk about what a math page would even look like for them? I think it's really important to kind of get all of the information at once, and then you can kind of build off of that for them. Speech generating devices are really incredible, and they're far more beyond just the high-tech tablet or iPad form. So that could also be an added level. Maybe we have to be making materials for something like a prox talker, where there are physical manipulatives that they are using to build a sentence or a phrase on that speech generating device. So like I said, I think collaboration and then just getting a foundation for where they are and what they already have and seeing if we can grow knowing that piece. Hope that answered the question. It was very vague.
I can speak more to the educational piece in the classroom and what that may look like for learners with CVI. So definitely being in contact with TVI, knowing your students' vision, how they access their vision, and just some general requirements that we do as CVI protocol at Perkins is we use a lot of high contrasting colors, we use solid black backgrounds, we use backlighting, and making the best of what our learners' visual access is, and really consulting with the CVI Center has been really helpful for the students in my class.
Any more questions in person? Anyone in the audience? Don't want to hog the mic. Okay. This is an online question. As a parent living in a state that is for the most part unfamiliar with CVI, how should I go about teaching my son's speech, occupational, and physical therapists about his specific needs without them feeling insulted? He makes amazing progress when the therapists believe he can progress. What is happening lately, however, is that what they're doing isn't working and they just blame him. When I mention his visual impairment, they don't get it because he can see.
First of all, I just want to acknowledge the struggle that you're going through, and I'm sorry for that experience. I know I've been to CVI symposiums here and heard the struggles that families experience trying to get services for their children. We're in a very resource-rich and privileged environment as Perkins providers, so I'm sorry that that's your experience. I will say that our CVI Center does a really incredible job of trying to share resources, and in the past few months, they came up with toolboxes that are on the website that are provider specific. So, you know, when thinking about as a physical therapist, here's the impact of CVI on a student's balance and thinking about the way that they move through their environment. So directing them to those resources, I think if you, and again, it's hard. I know this came up in some of the other presentations today, that it takes time and effort and emotional energy and investment to be an advocate for your child, but to just compile those resources. And when they have a 3-year evaluation, request that in the recommendation that those resources are included so that it carries over to any change in providers or future settings.
So I definitely second what you said about empathizing with the situation you're in. That is a very difficult position and so much pressure on our parents to be the advocates for their children. What that question made me think of was how often we also have to prove to others in students' lives what they're able to do. I think what can make the conversation a lot quicker is videos and photos really make it impossible to deny skills that students have and are a really quick and accessible way for others to see and understand what you're describing. So I, of course, always want to listen to what my parents have to say. Sometimes I get an email, they describe something and I might not quite get it. The second I see a video or a photo, I know exactly how to translate that into my setting. Some skills might be harder to capture, but when you can, it is a pretty incontrovertible way to get the team on board and show them just how capable your child is.
That was the last question.
Thank you so much.